It was a tense atmosphere in the exam hall. During the early morning of Wednesday, all the children gathered there. There was an ammonia smell on the floor, which made the children stay awake and focused. "Excuse me, teacher, can you come here?" Kayla asked, unafraid to ignore the test paper staring at her. What was wrong with the assignment? 10-year-old Kayla Michaels was a detail-oriented girl. She was preparing for her 4th grade class's FSA test, a challenging test that could determine her academic future. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. A tense atmosphere surrounded the exam hall as students nervously browsed their test booklets. Taking the test every year was mandatory. The family lived in Ferndale, Florida, where Kayla was raised by her parents. In addition to her strong will, she was known for her sharp intellect. She was a 4th grade student at the local elementary school. Every year, students experience anxiety when the dreaded FSA test rolls around. The same was true this year. The stress was added to the students' and teachers' workloads. Kayla immediately realized there was a glaring error in the instructions as she read them. An obvious typo was also found in the instructions. Her frown deepened, as she couldn't help wondering what other errors might lurk within the questions themselves if the test instructions were incorrect. Kayla's exam hall was filled with hushed tension as she sat with her classmates. When Kayla received the test booklet, her eyes immediately spotted a typo. It was unbelievable to her. There was an error on this English test. On such an important test, how could they make such a mistake? A sense of responsibility arose in Kayla's heart as she raised her hand. The quiet hall made her nervous as she cleared her throat. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said to the teacher, her voice wavering with nervousness. "But there's a mistake in the instructions. It says carefully instead of carefully." Seeing the instructions, the teacher frowned. "Oh dear, that is indeed a mistake," she acknowledged. A copy of the first page was scanned and placed on the table by Mrs. Watkins. However, the test has been thoroughly reviewed, and we assure you that there are no errors in the questions. "Please proceed with the exam as planned." Kayla stared at her in confusion. Kayla said, "I understand, Mrs. Watkins, but I think there's something wrong here." This caused Mrs. Watkins' eyes to widen in shock. Kayla wasn't easily persuaded. Standing her ground, her heart pounded. "If there's a mistake in the instructions, it makes me doubt the accuracy of the questions too. How are we supposed to be graded fairly when there are already errors in the test?" Other children started to notice the typo and started siding with Kayla as a murmur of agreement swept through the room. A huff of exasperation escaped Kayla's lips. Suddenly, whispers and anxious glances dominated the once orderly exam hall. There was a growing sense of reason in the other children's responses to her question. Within minutes, murmurs spread across the room like wildfire as the rest of the children listened intently. "She's right," one child said. "What were the marks of the person who set the test?" Another child said. It became apparent to the students that the test was not valid. How could they perform at their best if the instructions themselves contained errors? The teacher tried to restore order, but the students were now restless and adamant. "We demand a fair test," someone shouted, and soon it was like a dam had burst. More voices joined the chorus, and the uprising Kayla inadvertently started gaining momentum. Would Mrs. Watkins be able to control the children in her exam hall? Panicked, the school administrators were called in to handle the situation. They warned the children that if they didn't comply with the rules, they could face severe consequences. But the students felt a newfound strength in unity and refused to back down. The school shouldn't be making errors if they expect the children to learn properly. Things were getting out of control as students started making paper airplanes out of their exam papers. The exam hall was in chaos and the teachers couldn't control them. In a last-ditch attempt to control the chaos, the principal approached Kayla. "You need to stop this right now," he said sternly, his eyes glinting with frustration. "Your actions have consequences and you'll have to face them." A sense of injustice filled the room and Kayla's words ignited a spark within her peers. They agreed with her wholeheartedly. The little girl didn't realize the greater issue she had uncovered. The exam hall was now a sea of unrest as the students rallied behind Kayla's cause. Would the children get to write their exams in peace? With tears welling up in her eyes, Kayla considered the choices before her. She could surrender and accept defeat, or she could continue to fight for what she believed was right. She knew that if she gave in, chance for a fair test might be lost forever. For the first time in her young life, she made a decision on her own. Summoning her courage, Kayla wiped away her tears and addressed her classmates, her voice quivering but determined. "We have the power to change things," she said. "We can stand up for what's right, even if it's difficult. Let's show them that we won't be silenced." The teachers stared at her, their mouths dropped open. It was as though they were in a movie. The children exchanged glances and a sense of solidarity filled the room. "We won't write," they started chanting in unison. They knew that their actions might lead to consequences, but the prospect of fighting for a fair chance at the exam was worth the risk. Their education was their future. Although Kayla had managed to win the support of her peers, the teachers were not impressed, as she had stopped the exam from starting. However, the teacher was less than pleased with this uprising. She sternly warned the students to stop causing a disturbance and threatened serious consequences if they didn't comply with the test rules. But the spirit of rebellion had taken root, and the students weren't backing down. As the clock ticked, the children's resolve remained unyielding. They continued playing in the exam hall. Some of their parents were called and some were already on the way. The school administrators realized they had no choice but to cancel the exam. The uproar had become too significant to ignore, and it sent shockwaves throughout the entire school district. News of the exam cancellation spread like wildfire, reaching the local media and sparking debates about the importance of fairness in education, and all media outlets wanted to cover the story. There was a TV news van parked outside the school. A few reporters were taking statements from enraged parents. It was the news highlight at 7 p.m. Kayla, determined to stand up for what she believed was right, refused to back down. She argued passionately, her small voice resonating with courage and conviction. Her friends were behind her standing on the desk, but her bravery came at a cost. The teacher asked her to leave the exam hall, fearing she might incite further dissent. What would Kayla do? Kayla had no choice but to leave. Outside the hall, Kayla felt a mix of emotions. She was proud of herself for speaking out, but she couldn't help worrying about the repercussions. Meanwhile, inside, the other children continued to question the fairness of the test and the authority that imposed it upon them. What would the teachers decide? News of the incident reached Kayla's parents, Lee, Oran's parents, Michelle and Lee, who were both proud and worried about their daughter's actions. As they rushed to fetch their child, they discussed their plan. However, their concern for Kayla's future overshadowed everything else, and they decided to take the matter to court. This was bigger than they thought. In a thrilling courtroom drama, Kayla took the stand, nerves and determination mixing within her. "We need to question the need for FSA testing today," Kayla said with conviction. Her eyes met those of the judge as she explained her reasoning with remarkable clarity. Her argument was compelling, and it struck a chord with everyone present. The courtroom was captivated by the 10-year-old girl's eloquence, and it became apparent that her concerns were not unfounded. There should be no room for error in education. This requires further investigation with our education laws, the judge said. The judge weighed the evidence carefully and made a landmark decision ruling in Kayla's favor and awarding her family a substantial sum of $1 million in damages. The verdict sent shockwaves through the education system. Kayla and her family were given compensation for defamation of character and other charges. Soon after, the news of Kayla's victory reached the ears of the governor of Florida, Robert Domingo. He realized that the FSA testing system had flaws, and it was time for a change. It was that Governor Domingo took decisive action, signing a bill that eliminated the annual FSA testing for Florida students, effective immediately. In its place, a more progressive progress monitoring system was implemented, which aimed to assess students' growth and development over time rather than relying solely on high-stakes exams. Was this the answer the schooling system was looking for? Kayla became a symbol of courage and change. Admired by her peers and respected by educators across the state, her brave actions brought about a revolution in the education system, leading to a fairer and more student-centric approach to learning. Kayla's act of bravery had unintentionally ignited a larger movement, inspiring students from other schools to demand changes in their examination systems as well. Kayla continued to be a brilliant and compassionate individual, always fighting for what she believed in. Her parents were proud that her child had the intelligence to change the world for the better. Her legacy continued to influence education policies, and her name became synonymous with positive change. It was an event that marked the history of American education. In the end, a small typo on a test paper sparked an uprising, leading to the end of mandatory FSA testing in Florida. Kayla changed the mindset of her teachers and peers for the better, and it was all thanks to the unwavering determination of a 10-year-old girl named Kayla Michaels. As they say, dynamite comes in small packages.